Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. The car's engine revved as I sped down the road. I was lost in thought, and hardly took notice of the rain crashing against my windshield. Nature seemed to sense my anger. The storm was rising. I poured more vodka down my throat, my eyes constantly darting to the shiny black handgun lying on the passenger seat. Brushing the cold metal with the tip of my fingers, my mind involuntarily flooded with images of my oldest daughter, Mara. Her entire life played through my mind in mere seconds. My last memory of Mara was from when I had to identify her body in the morgue. My hands began to shake. An uncontrollable tremor spread through my body. I pulled over the car, unable to continue, and slammed my fist against the steering wheel. The images of the morgue would not leave me. I closed my eyes. There she was, lying on a metal table. A blanket had been carefully draped over her body, only revealing her pale face. She had just turned 16. Death seemed to have aged her well beyond that. The pathologist placed his hand on my shoulder. I had not been able to comprehend any of his words. The man's actions had seemed so forced and well practiced, it only angered me more. I had asked for a moment alone. After the doctor left, I hesitantly placed my hand on my daughter's cheek. Almost instantly I pulled it back. She had felt so cold. I stared at her lower abdomen, where I knew the knife had pierced her. For a fraction of a second, I contemplated pulling away the blanket and exposing the wound. But I could not muster the strength. She looked peaceful now, as if she was sleeping. I feared exposing the wound, which had killed her, would somehow change that. That had been little over a month ago. The police had quickly caught the youth who committed the crime. Some bum who'd attempted to rob her and wielded his knife a little too overenthusiastically. He had murdered her, although she had given him her purse. I punched the wheel again. It wasn't fair. The youth's trial was yesterday. He'd been acquitted on account of procedural mistakes by the police. The man had smiled at me as they led him out of the courtroom. It wasn't fair. That bum had destroyed my life at an astounding rate. My wife could barely stand to look at me anymore. A week ago, she moved out of the house and took our youngest daughter with her. She told me I needed help. She said she couldn't watch me ruin my life. I didn't blame her. This past month I found solace in liquor. I could not let go of my pain. It festered into an uncontrollable rage. All I could think about was the injustice of it all. All I could see was the pale face of my dead daughter. All I wanted was to kill the man responsible. It became an obsession. I had been unable to console my wife. My youngest daughter had practically not spoken since the loss of her sister. I found her quietly curled up in Mara's bed most days, unable to let go, unable to move on. I broke my heart. I had felt a strange sense of relief watching them both drive off. I did not need them to see what happened next. I did not want my youngest daughter to witness her dad being dragged away for murder. I preferred the solitude and the warm embrace of alcohol. My eyes darted back towards the gun, and I sighed. I had to do this. Otherwise I would never know peace. Determined, I turned the ignition key. The car purred gently before reverting into stillness. I turned the key again. Nothing happened. I cursed loudly and tried again. Nothing. I took out my frustration on the steering wheel until both my hands ached. I grabbed my phone, ready to call a tow truck, but it would not switch on. The wind howled outside. I checked my wristwatch, but the handles had stopped moving. Everything seemed in suspension. After a short internal debate, I decided. The thought of remaining in the car suddenly seemed unbearable. Feeling restless, I kicked open the door and got out of the car, hastily stuffing the phone in my jacket pocket. The storm was livid. Rain poured with such force it temporarily deafened all other thoughts coursing through my mind. I was drenched within seconds, but it didn't bother me. I started walking down the road, crossing a little bridge across a river. Mumbled curses escaped my mouth as I realized I was lost. A cold mist lazily enveloped me. Not knowing what else to do, I continued walking until a distant light pierced through the gray veil. Like a moth, I gravitated towards it. Its source, a small bus stop. Relieved to have found some cover, I fell back into one of the metal seats. My hands felt numb. I rubbed them together for a couple moments before reaching into my pocket for my pack of cigarettes. After taking a long drag, I closed my eyes and leaned back against the bus stop. Slowly, I blew out a cloud of smoke, and the tremor subsided. Without instruction, my mind drifted back towards the youth who'd killed my daughter. A familiar doubt fell over me. I had always valued human life. As a family man, I'd constantly tried to maximize everyone's happiness. Now here I was, committed to blowing a hole in the head of my daughter's murderer. I turned around and looked at my reflection in the glass. I could no longer recognize the pale, lined face staring back at me. Droplets of rain slid down the glass. It gave my reflection even more of a somber appearance. I looked back out in front of me and took another drag from the clammy cigarette stuck between my fingers. Closing my eyes, I exhaled, expelling another cloud of smoke. "Rough day." The voice startled me. The cigarette slipped from my grasp and fell down my shirt. I jumped up swearing as ash scorched my chest. "Jesus Christ," I muttered at the young boy standing before me. The boy grinned. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you." I shrugged and sat back down. The boy took a seat beside me. "It holds a strange beauty, doesn't it?" I glanced at him. "What does?" He nodded out at the storm. There was a silence. I broke it by standing and pacing up and down the little bus stop. "When is the goddamn bus going to get here?" The boy gave me an appraising look. "I'm afraid no bus can take you to where you want to go, John." I absent-mindedly shrugged off his words and lit another cigarette. After my first drag, it hit me. I stared at the boy. He stared back. A latent intensity burned in his eyes. "How do you know my name?" "I know a great many things." I snorted. "Sure. I know the pain you feel, John. I have seen it before. Many times." I crushed the pack of cigarettes in my hand, feeling a fresh wave of anger crash over me. "You don't know me." The boy gave me a sad smile. "I have seen this before. Someone loses someone close to them. As a result, you feel rage build deep inside of you. Fueled by guilt, because you weren't able to prevent what happened. Unable to see that it was beyond your control to begin with. You could never have changed what happened, yet you cannot forgive yourself either. The mind cruelly tortures the body, until your heart is riddled with sorrow. Now your existence is anguish. You wish you had been the one to die, because the thought of living on just seems too difficult. Living in this world does not seem bearable at the sight of such a loss." I remained speechless, unable to comprehend the little boy beside me. The boy sighed and scratched the back of his head. "I've seen this before. After a while it all begins to look the same. The faces may change, but emotion remains constant. Your face is lined as so many before you, a canvas of hate and anger." The boy sighed again and jumped to his feet. "Murder will not bring her back." I spun towards the boy. "What did you say?" "Mara's gone. Murder won't bring her back." The boy spoke the words so casually it took me a moment to register them. Then, before I could stop myself, I slammed the boy against the glass wall. The entire bus stop trembled. "Don't you say that name!" I shouted. Tears began streaming down my face. "Don't say it!" The boy stared at me with a blank expression. He put his hand around mine and slowly pulled loose from my grip, his fingers hard as iron. "I feel for you. I really do. Your daughter deserved better." "Shut up! I know you think revenge will dull the pain, that somehow using that thing in your pocket will make you feel better." I fished out the gun. The boy stared at it. Something dark swept across his face. He briefly held out his hand before suddenly retracting it, as if the gun had electrocuted him. "That will not solve your problems. That man deserves to die." I spat out the words with as much bile as I could muster. Then I fell back into the metal seat, suddenly exhausted. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I took some deep breaths in an attempt to calm myself. The boy stood motionless, staring at the falling rain. "You know, it never gets easier," he finally muttered. "After all these years of helping people cross over, it still remains difficult to let go sometimes. Some deaths are so much more deserving than others. I should not judge anyone, yet I cannot help but feel for some of them. Occasionally the ones I meet radiate such light it pains me to extinguish it. I don't always want to, but I have no choice. My existence is one of duty." The boy radiated an eerie calmness as he spoke. I felt my heartbeat returning to normal. "Who are you? How do you know these things?" The boy gave me a sad smile. "I guess I am a traveler. Everyone will meet me at some point in their lives. Whether it is in the beginning or the end or somewhere in between. I don't understand." The boy shrugged. "I wouldn't expect you to." The boy looked at his watch. "The bus should be here any minute." As soon as he'd spoken the words, two lights cut through the inky darkness. The bus stopped before us, and the doors slid open. The boy climbed up the little staircase. Once he got to the top, he spun around. I've never done this before, but will you take a short journey with me, John? Where are we going? The boy shrugged. I'm not sure yet. All I know is that you should join me for this. I hesitantly looked at the boy. There was something about him. I felt compelled to join him. I took the boy's hand and climbed up the stairs behind him as the doors closed. The bus driver was old, very old. A shroud of matted white hair draped around his shoulders. Icy blue eyes stared at us. I instinctively pulled out my wallet and passed him some cash. The boy laughed and held back my hand. I'm afraid that won't work. I don't have anything else. The boy tapped my wristwatch. Show him that. I stuck out my arm towards the driver. He stared at it before also tapping the watch a couple of times and inspecting the unmoving dials. Seemingly satisfied, he waved us inside. The boy hurried towards the back of the deserted bus and waved me over. I sat quietly beside him. Where are we going? The boy grinned. This journey is not about a destination, Peresi. Then what is it about? It's about everything, the boy exclaimed. And also about nothing. The boy must have recognized the exasperation on my face. He cleared his throat. You should consider yourself lucky, John. I laughed humorlessly. I should consider myself lucky? Lucky that my daughter is dead? Lucky that my wife can barely stand to look at me. Lucky that my other child has barely spoken in weeks. The boy's eyes grew hard. Having someone you love ripped away before their time is difficult. I understand that. Do you really? I muttered sarcastically. More than you could possibly imagine, the boy replied coolly. I have guided many people before their time. I have comforted both young and old, held the hands of bother murderers and the murdered. I have held newborn babies and taken children from their parents' embrace. I have walked the fields of countless battles. I have waded through rivers of blood. Wherever I go, the dead follow, like moths attracted to a flame. You could not comprehend the endless sorrow I must navigate. He wiped a single tear from his eye. Within them I saw only grief, as if his words had opened an old wound. I felt sorry for him. Sometimes I feel so far away from everything, the boy continued. I worry I've become too indifferent. I fulfill my duty without truly understanding what it is I should be doing. I feel like a spectator watching eternity unfold itself. I offer hope to those I meet whenever I can without knowing whether my words are true or not. I have no idea what comes after this, John. I wish I knew. I wish I understood my purpose. My life is a paradox. My existence is perennial and yet one of insufferable solitude. You must feel lonely. The boy nodded. After that we sat together in silence. The boy stared out the window. He seemed deep in thought. I felt my eyelids grow heavy and before long, I had fallen asleep. I woke up disoriented. The bus was deserted and for a moment I thought I'd dreamed my encounter with the boy. Then the bus driver turned around. His blue eyes pierced through me and he pointed towards the little hill we were parked beside. He is waiting. With a quick nod I jumped off the bus. I reached the top of the little hill panting. The boy leaned against a tree and observed the spectacle unraveling itself below. A small crowd had fathered before a tiny grave. A priest stood reading from the Bible. His actions seemed almost mechanical in their repetition. Why are we here? The boy remained silent. Whose funeral is this? The boy nodded at the crowd down below. You know whose funeral this is. I quickly scanned the crowd, only recognizing familiar faces. Is this my funeral? Is that what this is about? Are you showing me what will happen if I murder Mara's killer? You know, the boy repeated, his voice a mere whisper. I looked at the people occupying the front row of chairs. My family was nowhere to be seen. My youngest daughter's godparents sat before the pitiful hole in the ground. They held each other as they cried. My knees suddenly felt weak. Slowly, I slid to the floor as tears soaked the earth around me. Where am I? Jail. A simple yet sobering reply. Where is my wife? The boy's eyes remained pricked on the little crowd below as he scratched the back of his head. She is not here, John. Where is she? I sobbed so hard the words left in a single slur. Your wife found her. After you were taken away, the little girl could not cope anymore and hung herself in Mara's room. Your wife was unable to handle the strain and had a breakdown. She is currently forcibly restrained in an asylum 2 hours away. Next week she will suffer a stroke. The boy glanced at me, his eyes riddled with pity. She will never recover. Slowly her will to live will siphon away, until only the smallest amount lies dormant in her heart. She will be trapped in her body, a mere husk of her former self, wanting to die yet unable to do so. I would not wish such an existence upon anyone. My tears had subsided for something worse, a feeling I can hardly put to words. a feeling of loneliness, so immense I could barely breath. I felt like I was being crushed by infinite grief. The boy smiled sadly. You see how cruel destiny is, John. By all accounts, your actions will be directly to blame for this. One moment of rage will destroy everyone you care about the most. What you seek is justice. What you offer is condemnation. A searing anger took hold of me. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you torturing me like this? The boy shook his head, but offered no reply. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run away and never look back, but I couldn't find the strength to get on my feet. Instead, I dropped my head in my hands. I thought I had more time. The boy smirked. Everybody always thinks they have more time. I wish I could have told her how proud I was. The boy placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. She knew. I patted his hand, unable to respond. Together we stood on the little hill in silence. The minutes crept by. Why did you really come to me? The boy scratched the back of his head and looked at me. He seemed to be deliberating with himself. I've always believed myself to be bound by laws I have no control over. Laws I don't quite understand. To my surprise, the boy suddenly chuckled. But lately I met someone so outrageous, they dared to challenge my path. Can you imagine? A speck of dust challenging the full might of the inevitable. The boy fell silent for a moment. Then he continued. She made me wonder whether I, too, can challenge what which seems inevitable. Maybe the constraints which bind me are self-imposed. Maybe I fear the freedom disobedience would grant me. The boy smirked. I live for those moments, reminders of how exceptional life can be. She made me realize something, John. If she managed to find the strength to confront me, then maybe someone as lost as myself, bound by eternity, might possess the power to break free. I don't understand. Sometimes when people die, their gaze manages to pierce through time, and they get a glimpse of what is to come. Your daughter saw all of this. He pointed at the crowd below. Then the boy smiled more genuine. Mara was exceptionally stubborn when I met her. She absolutely refused to come with me. She refused to submit to her fate as few have done before her. The thought brought a smile to my face. Do you know why she refused to come with me, John? Out of anger? The boy shook his head. Out of love. Her love for you. For her mother. For her sister. Her love was strong enough to challenge forces even I dare not resist. I was in awe of her, John. That's why I promised her to show you this. She truly was a kind child. Silent tears rolled down my face, but their sting was less painful than before. The boy grabbed my hands and gently pulled me back to my feet. In time you will see her again. She will be waiting for you. For all of you. But she hoped she would still be waiting a while longer. Do you understand? I did not have the strength to answer. All I could do was give the boy a weak nod. Together we walked back to the bus and took our familiar seats in the back. Thank you, I said after a moment. Thank you for taking care of Mara. Thank you for helping me. The boy looked taken aback. Wherever I go, people usually fear me. They recoil at my touch, even if I only mean to help. I have always been hated because I am a reminder of the inevitable. Never before has someone thanked me. His words carried such emotion. I tentatively put my arm around the child's shoulder. The boy gazed up at me. Tears slowly formed in his eyes. He leaned into me and cried. I let him. Before long I fell into a deep sleep. When I awoke, we were back at the bus stop. The boy accompanied me to the front, where the doors slid open. I walked down the little stairs. The moment my feet hit the pavement, the dials on my watch began to move once more. This is where we part, the boy said from inside the bus. I looked at him sheepishly. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I did not know what to say. Where will you go from here? The boy shrugged. I never know. Are you death? I suddenly blurted. The boy grinned as the doors slowly slid closed. I sat at the bus stop long after the bus had disappeared. Then I walked back towards my car. On the bridge I took the gun from my pocket and swung it into the river. I was ready to go home. To help you better understand why I am where, I'll provide some context on how I ended up trapped inside of these bizarre walls. And then maybe you could help me. I'm a young architecture student living near an upper-class neighborhood in my town. I've always wanted to explore it and learn more by observing how luxury homes are built, as this is the career path I want to pursue. However, I never had the courage to start my adventure. I'm a middle-class boy, and I would clearly stand out like a sore thumb in a place where I don't belong. I've always been excluded, and I didn't need another place to feel inferior. But now, at the beginning of the semester, our professor assigned us an urbanism project. We'd have to analyze houses, report their characteristics, interview residents, analyze this information, and align them with the neighborhood's location and how it interacts with its surroundings. For me, this was a sign. So I decided to muster up my courage and, overcoming the sense of inferiority that has always weighed on me, I went to explore the beautiful streets I've always been curious about. Now, I know this was a mistake. The neighborhood is very noble and antique, similar to the beautiful suburbs filled with millionaires per square meter, isolated in their mini pieces of heaven outside the city. The level of security, even though it's in a central region, seems quite high, as most of the houses I passed had low walls or none at all. They were imposing and grand, yet welcoming and cozy, with charming adornments and references to old styles, bringing a bold and interesting vibe to the neighborhood. The streets are framed by wide sidewalks made of well-cut cobblestones and flower beds where trees, certainly older than me, stood. Walking under the shade of the trees, I came across a huge, dense wall. It was very strange because, in those 30 minutes of walking, I had gotten used to the open view that allowed me to even see inside some of the residences. The wall was covered in numerous types of climbing plants that clung to the stones that formed it, almost invisible due to how dense the layer of plants was. Although apparently healthy, it hadn't been cared for in years. The vines grew freely but organized themselves in a pattern, as if a perfect ecosystem had been created on the stone blocks by itself. But contrary to what you might be thinking, like a messy, chaotic tangle, the vines and moss grew in an orderly pattern, as if they knew how to look beautiful. It was so attractive that as I walked along the sidewalk following the wall, I ran my hand through the foliage, following the beautiful curved patterns that formed. I was in love with the beauty of those plants. I continued walking for a few more meters. It was incredibly relaxing. The weather was cool, the air moist and light, filling my lungs with the distinct freshness of natural plants. My hand, already damp from the moss, continued its journey along the elliptical patterns, and on my shoulders, I felt the dew from the large trees dripping. Even now, I think it was strange how much water was in there. I don't remember the last time it rained here, and the leaves of the trees sparkled with drops as delicate as small diamonds. The walls were also quite damp, but that was justifiable due to the large presence of lichens and moss. I was so distracted by the patterns of the vines that I didn't even notice when I reached a protrusion in the wall of leaves. Surprised, I looked around, trying to orient myself. I had walked almost an entire block. Indeed, it's no wonder why the house is walled. Even in this neighborhood, the other houses looked small compared to it. As I gathered my thoughts, I noticed a woman in my peripheral vision while trying to figure out where I was. She appeared to be around 50 years old, or maybe a bit younger. The woman seemed to sense that I didn't belong there, just as I had feared, almost as if she could smell my middle-class scent. So on impulse, I approached her and asked very politely, "Hello, ma'am. I'm an architecture student conducting field research in this neighborhood, analyzing the houses. Basically," I tried to smile, and surprisingly she smiled back but crossed her arms. Then I continued, "So I noticed that these high walls really stand out around here. Do you know who owns this place, where the entrance is, so I can ask a few questions?" As I turned to point out which walls I was talking about, even though it was clearly obvious since they ran along the entire street, I was shocked to realize that it was already dusk. I had arrived in the neighborhood at exactly 11 a.m. to start my work. I had walked a lot, but it still didn't make sense to me that more than 5 hours had passed. I had explored 2 streets before coming across the wall and following it. As I pointed to the large mass of foliage, I noticed from the distance that the wall was much more peculiar than I had imagined. It was almost totally covered in vines, which now, from farther away across the street, definitely formed a complex pattern unnatural. Moreover, near the protrusion where I almost hit my face, there was a narrow, very tall door, at least 3.5 meters high. It was a distinct color, quite unusual for modern houses, but it matched the wall perfectly. A blue that resembled bronze when it starts to oxidize. The door was incredibly decorated and seemed to have been handmade, as its detailing and carvings were very delicate and small, covering every inch of its surface. On the side of the door, several monoliths of the same color, although with different heights, stretched out of the wall, forming an upward curve to the top of the wall, which was about 4 meters above the door. One thing that caught my attention was that none of them were covered by the vines, leaving them perfectly visible and somehow following the same pattern as the plants. Were they installed later? I wondered. Now I'm starting to think there's something strange behind this. I continued following with my eyes and came across huge metal plates that seemed to weigh tons. I don't know how an old stone wall full of vines could still support so many plates, especially at the top. They were squares of about 1.5 meters, as detailed as the door, but certainly made of a different material, with a rougher texture and a matte finish. They were all colored: burnt pink, absinthe green, deep blue, bloody red, and pale purple. Looking carefully, I could see that, unlike the gate, where some parts were missing and it was clearly poorly maintained, the plates seemed perfect. Even though I felt they were older than my grandparents. They were all carved with grooves and recesses that formed images of countless types of fungi, algae, and plants that I had no idea what they were, aside from some insects, which stood out for being golden. All these elements together formed different symbols, totaling 7. For in the center of each plate, and 3 at the intersections between them. I was snapped out of the hypnosis I was in by a drop of dew on my forehead. After this dazzling vision, I looked again at the little bit of sky visible between the trees and realized it was already getting dark. Until now, I have the feeling that time doesn't make sense anymore. This definitely snapped me out of the trance that those plates had put me in, and I looked around again. The woman, the neighbor of the wall, was no longer there. I guess she got tired of me standing there like an idiot and left. So, I made the stupid decision to go to the gate. When I got close, I felt extremely uncomfortable. Now up close, the details of the gate were even more noticeable. It probably took years to design every centimeter. And now it was in decay, with moss accumulating in the deeper details and a kind of slime covering the wear, as if trying to hide it. It was as if nature wanted to preserve the perfection of something as beautiful as that gate. I covered my hand with my coat and went to knock, but at that exact moment, I was blinded. My eyes burned, and I was disoriented in the midst of a bright light. I staggered back 3 steps and saw a damn spotlight, almost like a sun, turn on right above me, a vibrant, almost toxic yellow. As my eyes burned, I squished them trying to see, and noticed a small door opening at the top of the gate. It was a boy, apparently. I couldn't see the face in detail because the light was blinding anything near it. I decided to continue my endeavor, ignoring the sensation running through my body. The curiosity of knowing who owned the house, and where those incredible pieces came from, blinded me completely. If regret could kill, I'd already be 6 feet under, buried. Like a moth to a flame, I needed to know more. So I said, "Hi, you live here, right? I'm an architecture student, and I think the architecture of the house is amazing. Can I?" Before I could finish, the person had disappeared, and I only heard a decompression sound, like when you open a jar of pickles and all the compressed air is released, along with a sound of rusty metal scraping against itself, sending shivers down my spine. A strong, earthy smell of dust, mites, and mold invaded my nose. I felt some of the mold falling on my face. I blew it off quickly while opening my eyes again. As my eyes focused, I saw a boy, apparently around his 16. I'm quite thin, but I could certainly carry that boy in my arms. He was fucking skinny. With a hesitant look, he stared at me and almost whispered, "You can come in. It's been a while since I've seen anyone. I mean, no one comes here." Then, in a bizarre attempt to soften the terrible mood before stepping through the gate, I said, "Ah, but you'll definitely make more friends, and they'll come visit you. I used to be introverted too." At that moment, he looked at me out of the corner of his eye, over his shoulder, which had some level of lordosis. His amber yellow eyes stared at me intensely, and he said dryly and firmly, "Now you're my friend." Almost automatically, I said a trembling yes and walked through the gate. Another stupid decision for the list. "Come, I'll show you the house. I'm sure an architect will appreciate the house like we do, unlike others," he murmured. The gate closed, and I felt the air compressing again, as if it wanted to suffocate me. I felt something dense around me, and the sensation of rarefied air, as if the oxygen was being sucked out of me before it even reached my lungs. The air was stale, and the smell I had noticed at the entrance became much worse as I entered. The feeling that I was dirty made me shiver under my coat, as if the mass of gas mixed with dusty mold was clinging to me. I found myself in a very small hall, but it maintained the height of the door, which made the room even more claustrophobic. Tiles the size of my palm covered the entire floor, with the same designs as the plates. There were hundreds of them, all certainly handmade. Their delicate painting and golden details were standing out even in the dust and dim light. The light fixtures reminded me of the Art Nouveau style, around the 1890s, the end of the period. Many houses were still built in this style until the 1900s, as it demonstrated great wealth since many pieces required highly specialized human labor. However, the beautiful crystal flowers proved to be weak. and with the lack of any windows, I felt like I was sinking in a lake of murky water. Lost and making notes and sketches of the small hall, which was with only me, light fixtures, tiles, and a small table, I felt a cold hand on my back. My soul shivered like drops of cold water when they hit hot oil. My eyes, which were still not fully adjusted to the dim light as they are now, searched for the origin of the chill. I looked to the side and saw the boy staring at me, his vibrant yellow eyes, just like the scarabs drawn on the floor shining in the light of the fixture, staring at me. His pupils were huge, absorbing as much light as possible. As I stared at him uneasy, he adjusted his posture, seeming much more comfortable. He changed and said, "Beautiful, aren't they?" I still remember the first time I saw them being unpacked and arranged on the floor. I was enchanted. I said with a forced smile, "Yes, very beautiful. I'm amazed by the work done in this house." At the time, I hadn't even realized what he had said, but what did he mean by having seen the pieces being unpacked? Had they been restored and reinstalled? Even without noticing his words, I had a discomfort stained on my face that I couldn't hide. No matter how cordial and friendly he seemed, he carried a strangeness that I can't explain. "Follow me," he said softly, stepping in front of a staircase with a beautiful arch made of the same material as the door, which now locked showed the details of its interior, intact on this side, allowing me to see the capital letter, N in the center. He repeated, "Follow me," seeming annoyed that I hadn't complied with his request. When I turned in his direction, he was already going up the stairs in the narrow staircase. A more robust person would never fit there. There was at most 70 centimeters of space between the walls. I probably entered through a passage that wasn't the main one. The floor of the staircase was also made of tiles, but these were matte and unique, one for each step. They were very well finished and watercolored, looking as if they were made of water, so perfect was the painting. The corners of each step were rounded with a metal piece, forming a triangle with an eye in the middle, golden like the boy's eyes. Getting lost in the notes and sketches that I was making on my iPad, and trying to remember the dates when each technique I saw before emerged, I was abruptly interrupted. "We're arrived," I heard in my mind. The boy was standing in front of a wooden door, two beautiful light fixtures illuminating its surroundings. With a bit more light, I could finally see more details of the boy. He was wearing a beautiful blue cardigan, with somewhere spots and slightly stained, but still nice and clearly very expensive. One thing I can't stop thinking about now is that the stain seemed a little puffy on the fabric and had a slightly velvety texture, exactly like the lichen that was covering the defects of the gate. How long had he not worn that cardigan, or did he wear it regularly without washing it? The more I think about it, the weirder everything feels. Returning to the moment I truly entered the house, which I now know is a mansion, the boy had knocked on the door 3 times. He looked at me over his shoulder without moving any other muscle, like a damn owl. Now I understood why he had no friends. I used to be emo, but this was way weirder than anything I've ever done. "Now we can enter," he said, exposing all his slightly yellowed teeth in a wide robotic smile. Rich people have more useless social protocols than I can enumerate, but knocking on the door of your own house before entering was new. But nothing was bothering me more at that moment than the happiness of that boy to receive a strange, nosy visitor at home me. Until something else caught my attention. Sounds of stuff being dragged across a wooden floor, metal creaking and footsteps. What was I going for, entering a fucking banker? Before I could sink into paranoid thoughts, he opened the door with effort. It was indeed a massive wooden door, most likely made of ebony, which would make it one of the most unique doors in the world, incredibly heavy and expensive. I passed through it, and now I'm here, alone, sitting in an armchair in the large entrance hall. Everything here seems untouched for years. My footprints are printed in the dust that sits on the floor. From where I'm sitting, I can see the dust dancing in the faint light of the wall fixtures and the large chandelier hanging from the ceiling. There are countless paintings on the walls, ranging from still lives to family portraits, but one then stands out, is right in the middle of the wall where the stairs to the second floor are located. It's at least 5 meters tall, and the ceiling here is even higher than the walls outside. This painting, from what I can see from where I'm at, appears to be a mother and her 2 children. A baby resting in her arms and an older boy, around 10 years old, standing beside them. It's certainly an old painting, both because of the style and size, but mainly because of the level of oxidation in the varnish, which is very yellowed. I'm trying to focus on analyzing every corner of this place to occupy my mind and not give space for a breakdown. The boy went down some stairs, which I can only see from the end of a corridor that is located in the other room on the right. He said he would call the governess since his mother was busy and could only meet me later, so he wanted her help to welcome me with excellence. That boy has been gone for over 30 minutes. I really don't know what to do. The large door I entered is locked. I don't see any doorknobs or locks, just the same crest with a large N in the center. After testing the door, I slowly, trying not to make the floor creak, walked over to one of the large curtains that stretched from the floor to the ceiling between the paintings. When I looked behind them, trying to move them as little as possible, hoping to see traditional 19th century windows, I was surprised by beautiful, incredibly detailed herbal-themed stained glass windows that took up much of the space the curtains covered. Hoping for a possibility of an escape to the outside, I pulled the heavy velvet curtain a bit more, and a cloud of dust, carrying that characteristic earthy, musty smell, flew over me. I waved my arms, trying to disperse it while coughing. After regaining control of my breathing, I turned my eyes back to the stained glass, and at that moment, I knew I was fucked. The damn stained glass was fake, attached on the wall and artificially illuminated by some kind of fluorescent monolith that glowed in a toxic yellow behind it. Several of these glowing stones extended across the entire stained glass, making it shine. It was a beautiful sight, but all I wanted to see was the sidewalk with its lampposts, or at least an external garden that could be my way out of this crap. That's why I'm writing this. I'm trapped, cornered, and I don't know what to do. I just heard a noise of something heavy being dragged upstairs. I have a few options. Wait for that damn boy to come back with the governess. Stay sitting here until the mother shows up, or explore for an exit. I have the room next door that has the hallway that leads downstairs, the stairs to the second floor, and also another opening on the opposite side that looks like it leads to another large hall. I've tried calling everyone. My dad is on a work trip. I've called him 3 times, and he didn't answer. I tried my 2 best friends too, and both haven't called me back. I think the bitches are still sick from the frat party they went to yesterday, even though they knew about the work we had to do. I hate reckless people. They do crazy shit and still always get away with it. They've always been adventurous. They even broke into an abandoned theme park and nothing happened. But now if I do something a little different, it ends in me being stuck in a weirdo's mansion that is apparently occupied by a governess, an absent mother, and mold. I even called the emergency, but they simply said it was wrong to make prank calls and hung up on me. I really don't know what to do. I'm scared to death, and it seems like every second I feel more trapped and spied on. While I'm writing this, the sound from upstairs continues, and it seems like I'm also feeling a vibration coming from the floor. But it might just be my anxiety creeping me up even more. The battery of my phone is half dead, and I decided to write this to try to ask for help and also leave proof that I was here. I think I'll investigate the paintings a little more, look at the stained glass windows, and maybe I'll find a door behind the curtains. Wish me luck. I'll update here if I find a way out or something else. I've always been the outdoorsy type. Hiking, camping, backpacking, it's what I live for. So when I found a remote trail deep in the woods that no one seemed to talk about, I thought I had struck gold. I was wrong. It started on a crisp autumn afternoon. The air was fresh, and the trees seemed to whisper as I walked deeper into the forest. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue on everything around me. That's when I saw something strange out of the corner of my eye movement, but too quick to be a deer. I chalked it up to my imagination. I'd been on the trail for hours, after all. As night began to fall, I set up camp by a small clearing, the flickering flames of my fire doing little to ease the growing unease in my chest. That's when I heard a rustling in the underbrush, followed by a low growl. I froze, trying to make sense of the sound. Then, through the shadows, it stepped into the clearing. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, with lanky limbs that twisted at unnatural angles. Its face was a horrific blend of a goblin, and something else. Its eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, a sickly yellow that made my stomach churn. Its skin, mottled and stretched like old leather, hung loosely on its bones. It had the features of a skinwalker, but its movements so agile and animalistic suggested it was something much worse. I stumbled back, almost knocking over my pack. The thing snarled, its mouth splitting open to reveal rows of jagged teeth. I couldn't look away, frozen in terror. It took a step closer, its claws clicking against the rocks. That's when I heard a voice, small but clear, coming from the darkness. "Don't move, human." I turned, and there just beyond the tree-line was a tiny figure, barely 3 feet tall. It was wearing a ragged cloak, and its long, hooked nose gleamed in the moonlight. A gnome. Stay still, it repeated, its voice strangely calm. It won't hurt you if you don't move. I was too terrified to speak. The skinwalker-goblin hybrid was only a few feet away now, its gaze fixed on me. I thought for sure I was about to die. But the gnome raised a tiny hand, and suddenly the creature stopped, as if some unseen force held it back. The gnome stepped into the clearing, slowly but confidently, and began chanting under its breath in a language I couldn't understand. The skinwalker-goblin hybrid snarled, struggling against the invisible restraint. Slowly, the creature backed off, retreating into the shadows from which it had emerged. The gnome turned to me, its eyes now soft but still wary. "Don't go any deeper into the woods," it said. "That thing hunts at night. It's not a creature of the forest. It was made, a twisted thing, and if you stay here, it'll come back." I didn't need to be told twice. Without another word, I grabbed my pack and bolted, not stopping until I was back at the trailhead and in my car. I haven't gone near those woods since, but I've heard whispers about others who've gone in, and I know what's waiting for them. So, if you're ever hiking deep in the woods and you hear something that doesn't sound right, just remember there's something out there that's neither man nor beast. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a warning. But most aren't. Stay safe. Initially, my memories of the crash were limited. A fractured, imperfect recollection missing crucial details. When I tried to remember those details, a series of jumbled images played in my mind, like I was reviewing a handful of blurry, out-of-focus Polaroids that someone had shuffled into a non-chronological order. Over time, that changed, my memories became clearer. But in the beginning, everything was a haze of motion and sound. This is what I remembered in the beginning. Divya and I are sitting next to each other. The other two passenger seats on the opposite side of the aisle are empty. The pilot turns around to us, and I only see him for a second, but there's something memorable about him. It's not the fear stitched to his face, nor is it the words he shouts to us. It's something else. Something important. My sister's smiling, big brown eyes alive with infectious excitement. Her lips are moving, trying to tell me something over the mechanical thrums of the aircraft's single engine. I peer out the window, watching the Alps pass under us. Verdant, green valleys. Smatterings of pine trees dotting the landscape, forming unique and cryptic shapes like geological birthmarks. Not birthmarks, actually. More like scars. Which is an important distinction, and I don't know why. An ear-splitting noise. It's deafening and sudden, like an explosion, but there's no fire. Not at first, at least. The gnawing and grinding of metal. Screams, from me, Divya, the pilot, and from someone else. Maybe there was someone else on the plane. The aircraft tilts forward. We enter a death spiral. Violent movement rips the pilot from his chair, and he's gone. There's something important about him. It's not the fear on his face, it's something else. Before I can tell what it is, we're meters from the ground. There's the roaring of atmosphere rushing through the holes in the cabin. Terror swells in my throat. I want to turn my head. I want to see my sister. But there's not enough time. Everything goes black. I'm plunged into the heart of a deep, silent shadow. It's not death, but it's similar. Briefly, I return. My consciousness bubbles up from the depths of that shadow, and my eyes flutter open. It's quiet now. No more screams, no more chewing of metal. Only the humming chorus of cicadas fills my ears. It was early morning when we crashed, now it's twilight. Air moves through my lungs, and it smells faintly of smoke and iron. Finally, I do turn my head, and I see Divya. She's not far, but she's broken. Her battered body hangs in a nearby oak tree like a warning. Dusky red blood stains the bark around Divya. It's sticky and warm on my fingertips when I'm close enough to touch it, leaning against the trunk, reaching to pull her down from the canopy. She's much too high up, but I keep flinging my hands towards the heavens, pleading for a miracle. Again and again I try to get a hold of Divya, as if I'd be able to anchor her soul to the earth with a tight enough grasp on her body. I blink, and when I open my eyes, I'm alone in a hospital room, lying in bed. Now there's no noise at all. Pure, vacuous silence for hours and hours as I slip in and out of awareness, until a question shatters that silence. "What do you remember about what happened to you, son?" says a tall, grizzled man in a dirty white lab coat, gray-blue eyes intensely fixed on my own. That first week in the hospital went by quickly. Dr. Osler and Nurse Annalise were very attentive, practically at my beck and call. My suspicions were at a minimum during that time, so I could actually lay back and rest. When I was finally lucid enough, I explained what I recalled about the crash to Dr. Osler, who listened intently from a wooden chair aside the hospital bed. My sister and I were Boston natives on holiday in the European countryside. We were flying over the Eastern Alps when something went terribly wrong with the plane. I couldn't remember if it was a spontaneous mechanical failure or if the pilot had accidentally collided with something. Either way, we fell to the earth like Icarus. I thought of Divya. A question idled in my vocal cords for a long while. A leech with hooked teeth buried in the flesh of my throat, resisting release. Eventually I asked. Courage was the spark, apathy was the match. The resulting fire singed that leech off my throat and out my mouth. Either she was alive or she wasn't. Do you know if my sister made it to the hospital? Brown hair, mole on her cheek? The doctor inquired, his voice warm and dulcet like a sip of hot apple cider spiked with brandy. I gulped and nodded, bracing myself. Yes, we have her here. She's in critical condition, but we're taking such good care of her. We believe she'll pull through, but she hasn't woken up yet. Relief galloped through my body, and I let my head fall back on the pillow, tears welling under my eyes. As I quietly wept, he continued to fill in the gaps, detailing where I was, how I got here, and what was next. Essentially, the plane crash-landed outside of Bavaria, southeast Germany. A farmer watched our meteoric descent from the sky and immediately called for an ambulance. Now, my sister and I were admitted to a small county hospital about 10 minutes from the wreck site. Both of my legs were broken, and I lost a significant amount of blood, but otherwise I was intact. Divya suffered greater internal injuries, so she was in the intensive care unit. Dr. Osler expected her to make a full recovery. There were no other survivors. He stood up, patted me on the shoulder, told me to sleep, and informed me that Annalise would be in soon to record my vital signs. When can I see her? When can I see my sister? His footfalls slowed until they came to a complete stop. He remained motionless for an uncomfortably long period of time, with his hand wrapped around the brass doorknob and his back to me. Never said a word. After about a minute of eerie inaction, he twisted the knob, pulled the door open, and left. That's when I first noticed something about my situation was desperately wrong. As the doctor exited my well-lit, windowless hospital room, I glimpsed whatever was outside. In an attempt to conceal it, he didn't swing the door wide open. Instead, he cracked it only slightly, just enough to squeeze his gaunt body through the partition, with his lab coat audibly dragging against the door frame. Despite his attempt to block my view, I saw enough to plant a seed of doubt in my head about Dr. Osler and what he had told me. A clock on the wall read noon, but whatever was outside the door was pitch black. The foreboding darkness outside my room was only the first domino to fall, though. Once I fully registered the uncanniness of that detail, a handful of other equally bizarre details came to the forefront of my mind, and I did not have a satisfactory explanation for any of them. For example, the hospital was completely silent. No PA system asking for the location of a particular surgeon or announcing that visitor hours were over. No ambient noise from a heavy hospital bed thundering down the hallway. Even my room was dead silent. Initially, I didn't notice. The quiet allowed me to fall into sleep without issue. That said, I was wearing an oxygen monitor. I had N4 in my arm. The machines above me appeared to be connected to both things, and yet they were silent too. Shouldn't they beep? Shouldn't they make some kind of sound? The only noises I ever heard were the voices of the hospital's staff members, and only when they were in my room, talking to me. Which brings me to Nurse Annalise. Initially, she was a tremendous source of comfort. Her very presence was sedating, humble and grandmotherly. Silver hair bustling over her shoulders as moved through the room. A charming, wrinkled smile on her face as she listened to me recount my life history to kill some time. Constant reassuring words about how well the hospital was taking care of me. But like everything else, once I looked a little harder, Annalise went from likable and endearing to peculiar and terrifying. First off, it seemed like she never left the hospital. For a week straight, she was my only nurse, coming and going from my room at random times, never anything that implied a shift schedule. One day, she came into my room 3 times within an hour to take my temperature, and didn't appear again until the following day. Another time, I woke up to her determining my blood pressure, the rubbery cuff tightly compressing my bicep. No stethoscope pressed to my arm, which I'm pretty sure is required for the measurement. She wasn't even watching the numbers rise and fall on the instrument's pressure meter. Instead, she was staring right at me, reciting the same phrase over and over again. "Aren't we taking such good care of you? Aren't we taking such good care of you? Aren't we taking such good care of you?" All the while, she was continuously inflating the cuff, pausing for a moment, releasing the air, and then repeating that process. I just pretended to be asleep at first. But after an hour of that, my patience ran thin. "Annalise, don't you ever go home, or are you the only goddamned nurse in this whole hospital?" I shouted. The cuff's deflating hiss punctuated the tension, slowly fading to silence over a handful of seconds. Eventually, she stood up, walked to the door, and exited, saying nothing at all. The behavior reminded me of how Dr. Osler reacted when I asked him about Divya. Honestly, I never saw Annalise again. Not alive, at least. Every single nurse from then on out was different than the last. Like somehow my singular complaint had rewritten the entire staffing infrastructure of the hospital. And I mean every single one. Now, instead of having one nurse day in and day out, I'd been visited by 30 different nurses over the course of a few days. It didn't make any sense. I asked for different nurses, and that's sure as shit what I got. After about a month in that room, and with my suspicions rising, I started developing an escape plan. The only thing that was really holding me back was my casts. Since the day I woke up in the hospital, thick marble white plaster completely encased each of my legs. The casts didn't appear to have been applied by a professional, though. The surfaces weren't smooth, they were rough and bubbling. Some areas clearly had more plaster than others, and there didn't appear to be a rhyme or reason for that asymmetry. Not only that, but the material seemed unnecessarily dense and heavy, and the casts were tightly molded to each extremity. It was nearly impossible for me to move on my own. Almost like they were created to function like chains, shackling me to that bed. Are my legs truly even broken? I considered, panic sweeping through me like a wildfire. "I want to see my sister," I demanded. The nurse, a short man with a thick brown-red beard, dropped the clipboard he had been scribbling on in response to my defiance. It clattered to the floor. With a vacant expression painted on his face, he walked over to the door, opened it, and left. As the door creaked closed, revealing a glimpse of the waiting shadows, I grimaced. The uncertainty of the oppressive darkness that lingered outside my room had, over time, begun to cause me physical discomfort. I needed to know what was actually out there, but God, I desperately didn't want to know either. In a way, it represented my predicament. On the surface, I was in a hospital, but that was farce, an illusion for someone's benefit. In reality, some terrible darkness loomed around me, pulsing just below the surface, spilling in every so often through the cracks in the masquerade. After a few minutes, Dr. Osler paced into the room, letting the door sway shut behind him. "Dr. Osler, you've told me Divya is alive. Countless times, you've assured me she's recovering here in this hospital. And yet, I haven't seen her once. Bring her here. If she's not healthy enough to come here, bring me to her." His gray-blue eyes bored vicious holes through me. He was livid, utterly incensed by my insubordination. "She's not done yet," he muttered. I stared back at him, dumbfounded and brimming with rage. "What the fuck does that mean?" The doctor looked away from me with a contemplative glint behind his eyes, recalibrating his response. With his head turned to the side, though, I felt another emotion simmer inside my skull, an uncomfortable familiarity. As I studied a subtle, skin-toned line that coiled down the side of his nose, my mind was pulled to the day of the crash. Before that horrible realization could fully crystallize, he spoke again. "Diva's not ready for visitors, I mean." "All right, well, what's the holdup? Tell me why she's not ready." His gaze met mine again, now grim and resolute. Soon, as that word crawled from his lips, he turned away from me and marched out into the darkness. I said nothing. No protestations, no name-calling, no angry last words. Instead, I felt my mind race. My nervous system buzzed with furious static, trying to comprehend and reconcile the overflow of information bombarding my psyche. Something about the way Dr. Osler's face contorted as he said that last word made the whole thing click into place. The pilot had a scar just like that. I could see it clear as day in my head, and I could finally recall what he shouted to Divya and I as he turned towards us from the cockpit. Fear sticked across his face. Something just landed on the wing. Moments later, that something violently ripped him from the plane. The impossibility of that realization lulled me to sleep like a concussion. Mental exhaustion just shut my body down minutes after the pilot/Dr. Osler left the room. When I awoke, it was 1:15 midnight. I had been asleep for a little over 6 hours. I may have slept for longer, had it not been for a sharp, stabbing pain in my low back, my salvation disguised as agony. I pushed my torso forward, twisting my hand behind my back to dig for the source of the pain. After a few seconds, My fingers landed on the curve of something metallic that had punctured through the fabric of the ancient bedding. Once I recognized the spiral object, my eyelids excitedly shot open. It was a tempered steel spring. Time and use had eroded the tip to where it had become sharp. The thing wasn't a buzzsaw by any means, but it was something accessible that could maybe dig through the plaster casts that were preventing my escape. However, before I could start trying to tear the spring out, a disturbing change compelled my attention. For the first time in a month, there was no light in my hospital room. As I scanned the darkened scenery, attempting to orient myself, I noticed something else as well. Something that pried the wind from lungs, leaving me breathless and silently begging for air. A motionless blob of contoured shadow in the corner. Someone was in the room with me. Who's there? I whimpered. The silhouette sprung to life, stepping forward until they were looming over the end of my bed. When it grinned, my heart leapt, dancing between relief, disbelief, and terror, never staying on one emotion for too long before moving on to the next in the cycle. Divya? At first, she nodded her head slowly. But over a few seconds, her nodding sped up, becoming frantic. Inhumanly quick vertical pivots that seemed to have enough force to shatter the spine in her neck. Greedy paralysis enveloped my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I could just watch as Divya lumbered around the side of the bed until she was right over top of me, still rapidly shaking her head up and down. As she bent over the bed's railing, the nodding stopped abruptly. Nearly forehead to forehead, my sister finally responded. Yes, it's me. Don't worry, okay? In fact, don't ask about me. I'm fine. They're taking such good care of us here. Her eyes were no longer brown. They were gray-blue. Like Dr. Osler's. Like Nurse Annalise's. Like every nurse's eyes, actually. And with that, she stood up, turned away, and walked out the door. From that night on, I accepted my sister was dead. With my attention undivided, I worked singularly towards escape. Grief could come later, after I was away from the thing that had killed her and commandeered her body. Disassembling the casts with the sharpened end of the spring was laborious. Every minute that thing wasn't in the room, I was scraping away at the plaster, making sure to focus my efforts on the underside of the mold rather than the outside. That way, if it inspected the cast, it wouldn't be as obvious that I had been incrementally weakening the plaster. If it was in the room, camouflaged as a real human, I smiled. Engaged in pleasant conversation. Profusely displayed my gratitude. Thanked it every chance I got. That's what it really wanted, I suppose. It wanted to feel appreciated. Giving it appreciation kept it docile. Eventually, I could tell that I had damaged the cast to the point where I could break myself loose with a few more forceful hits. Once I did, however, I knew there was no going back. My intention to slip out of its clutches would be written all over my freed legs. And as much as I attempted to discern a pattern to its appearances in my room, I just don't think there was one. Unfortunately, that meant there wasn't a right time to make my escape. I had to guess and pray it wasn't nearby when I made my move. Luck was on my side that day. The thing was close, but it was preoccupied. Despite shedding nearly 20 pounds of body weight in that hospital room, barely sustaining myself on the infrequent helpings of brackish meat soup the thing brought me, my legs couldn't hold me upright. They had simply atrophied too damn much, muscleless sleeves burdened with fragile bones and calcified tendons. Thankfully, my arms had retained enough strength to drag my emaciated body across the floor. With my back propped up against the wall aside the door, I halted my feeble movements and just listened. No footsteps running down the hall. No whispers of, "Aren't we taking such good care of you?" coming from right outside. All I could hear was the fevered thumping of my heart slamming into my ribs. I took a deep breath, reached my arm up to the knob, and slowly slid the door open. It wasn't hell on the other side of the door, like my restless mind had theorized on more than one occasion. Not in the literal sense, anyway. I really was in a hospital. It was just abandoned. Had been for a while, apparently. A discarded German newspaper I discovered was dated to September of 1969. The dilapidated medical ward was dimly lit by the natural light that filtered in from various broken windows. Thick dust, shattered glass, and skittering insects littered the floor. I crawled around overturned crash carts and toppled transport beds like I was navigating the tunnels and trenches of Okinawa. At the very end of the hallway, I spied a patch of weeds illuminated by rays of bright white light. There was my escape, an open doorway, a portal to the world outside this place. Flickers of hope were quickly overshadowed by smoldering fear. As I got closer and closer to the exit, An unidentifiable smell was becoming more and more pungent. A mix of rotting fish, bleach, and tanning leather. The thing wasn't gone, it was still here, and when the aroma became truly unbearable, I knew I had reached the place it called home. I didn't see everything when I crawled by, but because the door had been ripped off its hinges and a massive hole in the ceiling was casting a spotlight over its profane workshop, I saw enough to understand. As much as I possibly could understand, anyway. The chamber that the stench was originating from was vast and cavernous. Maybe it served as a lecture hall or a cafeteria at some point in time. Now though, it had a different purpose. It was where the thing kept its costumes. That abomination had pretended to be every person I'd interacted with while in that hospital. Dr. Osler, Annalise, all the other nurses, and most recently Divya. A horrific stage play where it gladly filled all the roles. That entire month, I thought I had talked to dozens of people. In reality, it had been this goddamned mimic every single time, camouflaged by a rotating series of gruesome disguises. Hundreds of eyeless bodies hung around that room like scarecrows, arms held outstretched by the horizontal wooden poles that were tied across their backs. Thick, pulsing gray-blue tethers suspended the bodies in the air at many different elevations from somewhere high above. Despite the ungodly odor, most of them seemed to be in relatively good condition, with limited visible signs of decay. The assortment of fleshy mannequins swayed lifelessly in the breeze that spilled in through the minivan-sized hole in the ceiling, glistening with some sort of varnish as they dipped in and out of beams of sunlight. Then I saw it, a gray-blue mass of muscular pulp roughly in the shape of a human being, cradling Annalise's eyeless corpse in its malformed arms at the center of the room. Thousands of flies' wings jutted from every inch of its flesh. Some were tiny, but others were revoltingly magnified. The largest I could see was about the size of a mailbox. Even though the thing appeared motionless, the wings jerked and twitched constantly, blurring its frame within a cloud of chaotic movement. As far as I could tell, it had its back turned to me and hadn't detected my interloping. Watching in stunned horror, the thing raised one of its hands, and I noticed it was holding something small and wooden. Every few seconds, it brought it down and delicately caressed the nurse's head with the object, dragging weathered bristles over her scalp. It was brushing Annalise's hair. Then it spoke, and I felt uncontrollable terror swim through my veins, causing my entire body to tremor like one of the abomination's wings. It sounded like 20 or 30 separate voices cooing in unison. Men, women, and even children sang the words together, a choir of the damned. "Aren't we taking such good care of you? Aren't we taking such good care of you?" I couldn't restrain my panic. Right before a blood-curdling wail involuntarily surged from my lips, I was saved by the thrumming of helicopter blades in the distance. The thing stopped speaking and tilted its head to the noise. At an unnaturally breakneck speed, it shot into the air and through the hole in the roof, carried into the sky by a legion of convulsing flies' wings. Then I was alone, howling into the airborne graveyard, with the myriad of preserved corpses acting as the only audience to my agony. They observed me crumble from their eyeless sockets, their stolen bodies still silently swaying in the wind. I didn't see Divya's body. Ultimately, though, I think that was for the best. After I crawled out of the hospital, it took me nearly a day to stumble across another living person, a man and his hunting dog. They delivered me to a real hospital, where I spent the next half-year recuperating from the ordeal. I told the police about the plane crash, the abandoned hospital, as well as the thing and its museum of hanging bodies. They didn't dismiss my claims, nor did they call me crazy. But it was clear that they didn't plan on investigating it, either. Whatever that thing was, the detectives knew about it, and they didn't intend on interfering with its proclivities. Maybe it was just safer that way. That all took place a decade ago. Since then, I've salvaged as much of myself as I could. It hasn't been easy. But, in the end, I put my life back together. Got married. Had a few kids. Symbolically buried Divya in a vacant grave with a tombstone. I listed her date of death as the day of the plane crash, and I hope that's actually true, but I don't know for sure, and I don't like to dwell on that fact. My biggest hurdle has been trusting people again, especially when I'm alone in a room with one other person. It feels decidedly unsafe. Checking their eye color helps, but sometimes it's not enough. What if it's that thing in disguise, looking to take me back to that godforsaken room? You might be wondering why I'm speaking up after all this time. Well, I've finally decided to post this because of what happened this afternoon. My wife returned home early from work. She's been acting odd, sitting on the couch by herself, listening but not speaking. Her eyes have always been dark blue. Today, though, they look a little different. I'm locked in our bedroom, and I can hear her saying something downstairs, but I can't discern the words. Once I post this, I'm going to open the door and find out. And I hope to God it's not what I think it is. We're going to take such good care of you.